I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. When my son told me I wouldn't be welcome at his house for Christmas, I smiled, got in my
Victoria,
car,
what do you mean
and
he's
made one
gone?
phone call. By New Year's, I had their mortgage payments canceled. And that was just the beginning of my plan. Justice must be restored and arrogance punished. You won't believe what I did next. The scent of cinnamon and apples filled Dylan's designer kitchen, the one I'd paid for with my retirement savings when Victoria decided the original wasn't sophisticated enough. I settled deeper into the leather sofa, another item funded by my late husband William's life insurance money. I could make my special turkey this year, I said, running my fingers over the smooth armrest. The one with the rosemary and thyme stuffing William used to love. Remember how he always said it reminded him of his grandmother's recipe? My words hung in the warm air, mixing with the expensive vanilla candles Victoria insisted on burning despite Dylan's mild allergies. The flames cast dancing shadows across the reclaimed barnwood dining table. Also my contribution to their home. Something in my son's posture changed. Shoulders pulling inward like he was bracing for impact. His wedding ring caught the light from their 12-foot Christmas tree as he shifted uncomfortably. "Mom," Dylan said, unable to meet my eyes. "Unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What do you mean? Why wouldn't I be welcome?" My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Dylan's gaze fixed on the marble coffee table, the one I'd helped him select last spring after Victoria decided their previous furniture wasn't elegant enough for entertaining her colleagues. "Victoria's parents are coming, and they'd prefer if you weren't here." "They'd prefer?" My hands went cold against the leather. "It's just easier this way, Mom. You know how the Thompsons are about traditions. They have their own way of doing things." His voice got smaller with each word, like he was shrinking inside his expensive cashmere sweater, another gift from me last birthday. I looked around the living room at the silk curtains I'd paid for when Victoria complained about privacy, at the hardwood floors that had come from my second mortgage, at the crown molding that had maxed out my credit card. Every inch of this house bore my fingerprints, my sacrifice, my love for my son. "Their own way," I repeated slowly. "And what way is that, Dylan?" He flinched. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." Through the kitchen archway, I could see Victoria's new KitchenAid mixer, the professional model she'd insisted she needed for her holiday baking phase. $2,000 of my money sitting there, probably used twice since October. Where will I spend Christmas then? The question came out quieter than I intended. Dylan's face crumbled. "Maybe you could visit Aunt Judith? Or we could do something the weekend after." The weekend after. Like Christmas was just another appointment that could be rescheduled for convenience. I stood up, my knees protesting after 62 years of carrying life's burdens, the last 8 of them alone since William passed. "I see. Mom, wait." But I was already moving toward the door, past the family photos where my face grew smaller and more distant in each frame, past the coat closet that held Victoria's collection of designer jackets. My hand found the doorknob, solid and cold under my palm. "Son," I said without turning around, "tell Victoria's parents Merry Christmas from the woman who paid for the roof over their heads." The December air hit my face like a slap as I walked toward my car. Behind me, I heard Dylan call my name once, then the soft click of the door closing. Final. Absolute. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, engine off, watching the Christmas lights twinkle in the windows of houses I'd never be welcome in. My phone buzzed, probably Dylan wanting to smooth things over with empty promises. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the key and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the warm glow of the house I'd bought but would never belong in. The heater hummed against the December cold as I navigated the familiar streets toward home. South Hills sprawled around me, every neighborhood corner holding memories of the woman I used to be. The one who believed family meant everything, who'd give her last dollar to see her son smile. That woman was a fool. I stopped at the red light on 29th and Grand, watching a young mother load Christmas presents into her SUV. Her children pressed their faces against the window, breath fogging the glass with excitement. Once upon a time, that had been Dylan and me, before Victoria, before I became nothing more than a walking ATM with inconvenient emotions. The numbers started rolling through my head like a broken slot machine. $2,800 every month for 5 years. My calculator had given up trying to make sense of it last spring when I'd finally added it all up. $168,000. More money than William and I had saved for our entire retirement. Gone. Just gone. I pressed the accelerator harder than necessary as the light turned green. My car responded with a growl that matched my mood. 5th Street. That was where I'd refinanced my house, our house, William's and mine, to cover their down payment. The loan officer had looked at me with pity I hadn't recognized at the time. "Mrs. Sanders, are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment. Not my son's future, not my family's security. Someone else's investment. Lincoln Avenue, the bank where I'd taken out a second mortgage when Dylan lost his job 2 years ago. "Just temporary, Mom. Just until I get back on my feet." Victoria had stood behind him, designer purse slung over her shoulder, nodding sympathetically while mentally calculating how much more my desperation was worth. Nothing, as it turned out. My desperation was worth nothing to them. I pulled into my driveway, the one with the cracked concrete I couldn't afford to fix because every spare dollar disappeared into their perfect suburban fantasy. The porch light flickered. Another repair I'd been putting off. Inside, the house felt hollow without William's laughter, without the warmth of family gatherings that would never happen again. My phone rang as I fumbled with my keys, the shrill tone echoing off the empty walls. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, probably wanting to explain why I wasn't good enough for her parents' delicate sensibilities. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 5 years to have this conversation. I answered on the 4th ring, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I'd pick up at all. "Barbara?" Victoria's voice dripped with false sweetness, the same tone she used when asking me to cover their water bill or property taxes. "I heard about the little misunderstanding with Dylan." "Misunderstanding?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my coat. "I don't think there's any misunderstanding, Victoria. You made your position quite clear. Look, I know this seems harsh, but you have to understand my parents' perspective. They're very traditional people. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays." "A certain atmosphere," I repeated. "And what atmosphere is that?" A pause. I could hear shopping bags rustling in the background, probably spending money that should have gone to their mortgage payment. Money that was my responsibility, apparently. "Well, they're not used to your kind of cooking. All that hearty home-style food. And frankly, Barbara, they're educated people. They expect conversations about current events, literature, art, you know." The words hit harder than a physical blow. 8 years of biting my tongue, of swallowing insults for Dylan's sake, of pretending not to notice the way she looked at me like I was some kind of hired help. My kind of cooking. My voice stayed level, controlled. "You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 3 years when money was tight? The pot roast you said reminded you of your grandmother?" "That was different. We were appreciative then, but now with my parents. Now with your parents, you can't have the middle-class peasant embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table." The false sweetness evaporated. "Don't be dramatic, Barbara. This isn't about class. It's about sophistication. My father graduated summa cum laude from Washington State. My mother speaks 4 languages. They summer in the Hamptons. What exactly would you contribute to dinner conversation? Stories about teaching 3rd graders for 40 years? Heat flooded my chest, but I kept my voice steady. I built a life from nothing after your husband's father died. I've shaped the minds of over 1,000 children. I've paid more in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, Barbara. Breeding matters, education matters, and frankly, William understood social cues better than you understand yours. The line went dead silent. She'd crossed it, the line I didn't even know existed until she'd stomped across it in her designer heels. What did you say about my husband? I'm just saying he knew how to blend in better. He didn't make waves. He understood that some spaces weren't meant for him. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. William had more class in his little finger than your entire bloodline will ever possess. Oh, please. He was a construction foreman who got lucky. At least he had the good sense to stay quiet about it. Victoria. My voice dropped to something I didn't recognize. I want you to listen very carefully. This conversation is over. We're done pretending to be family. You can't just... We're done, I repeated, and ended the call. I set the phone down carefully on the counter, my hands surprisingly steady. Around me, the kitchen felt different, smaller but somehow cleaner, like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. I walked to my desk in the corner, pulled out the manila folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank statements, mortgage papers, 5 years of automatic transfers that had bled me dry while they lived like royalty. Time to stop the bleeding. The documents spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. 5 years of bank statements, each one showing the same automatic transfer. $20,800 on the 15th of every month, vanishing from my account into theirs, a paper trail of my own stupidity. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. First year, $33,600. Second year, another $33,600. By the 3rd year, I'd stopped buying myself new clothes. The 4th year, I'd started shopping at discount grocery stores. This year, the 5th year, I'd been eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch to make ends meet. $168,000. Not counting the down payment. Not counting the times I'd covered their utilities when Victoria's shopping addiction got out of hand. Not counting the new roof, the landscaping, the furniture that was essential for their lifestyle. I sat back in my chair, looking at the numbers until they blurred. William's life insurance money. My retirement savings. The college fund we'd started for grandchildren I'd apparently never be allowed to see on Christmas. All of it gone. Poured into a house where I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my bank. The automated system offered me options in English and Spanish. How thoughtful. Customer service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today? I need to cancel an automatic transfer, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Certainly, ma'am. I'll need your account number and some verification information. I rattled off the numbers, listening as she typed in the background. Professional, efficient, no judgment about why a 62-year-old woman was canceling payments that were probably her son's mortgage. I see the transfer you're referring to, Mrs. Sanders. $2,800 monthly to Wells Fargo, account ending in 7423. How long have you been making this transfer? 5 years. The words tasted bitter. And you want to cancel it effective immediately? I looked around my kitchen at the outdated appliances I couldn't afford to replace, at the walls that needed painting, at the windows that leaked cold air because I'd spent my home improvement money on someone else's castle. Effective immediately, I confirmed. Done. The transfer has been canceled. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, surprising myself with how good the word felt. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden quiet of my house. Outside, December darkness was settling over Spokane. Christmas lights twinkled in windows where families gathered without conditions, without judgment, without the need to hide who they were. For the first time in 5 years, next month's budget would balance. For the first time since William died, I could afford to fix my porch light, buy decent groceries, maybe even take a vacation. I gathered up the bank statements, the mortgage papers, all the evidence of my generosity. Then I walked to my fireplace, struck a match, and watched 5 years of martyrdom turn to ash. The fire felt warm on my face, warmer than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed with a text message, probably Dylan wanting to apologize, or Victoria needing money for something essential like new throw pillows. I didn't check it. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. Tonight felt special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to William's photo on the mantel, to the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said, and meant it. The next morning arrived crisp and clear, December sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows as I nursed my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how much money would disappear from my account in 3 days. The freedom tasted better than the Colombian blend I'd finally allowed myself to buy. My phone rang at exactly 10:47 a.m. Victoria's name flashed on the screen like a warning label. Barbara. Her voice carried that familiar tone of barely concealed impatience. I need you to pick up my parents from Spokane Airport. Their flight from Portland arrives at 2:00. I set down my mug carefully, watching the steam curl toward the ceiling. Victoria, did you forget about our conversation yesterday? Look, whatever that was about, we need to focus on practical matters now. My parents need transportation, and you're the only one with time during the day. The audacity was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't worthy of sharing Christmas dinner with her family, she expected me to serve as their personal chauffeur. And you're asking me because that's what family does, Barbara. They help each other. Her voice sharpened with irritation. Besides, let's be honest here. You're too weak to be my rival, so just get in your car and pick them up. There it was. The final insult wrapped in a command. What airline? I asked quietly. Alaska Air Flight 447. They'll be at baggage claim carousel 3. And Barbara, they're expecting someone who can handle their luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping against something hard, probably her granite countertop, the one I'd paid for when she decided laminate wasn't suitable for her dinner parties. Of course, I said. I'll take care of everything. Good. And wear something decent. Maybe that blue sweater you wore to Dylan's promotion dinner. They notice things like that. The line went dead. She hadn't even said thank you. I sat back in my chair, looking at my phone's blank screen. 2:00. Flight 447. Baggage claim. Carousel 3. I glanced at the wall clock above my sink. 10:52 a.m. Plenty of time. I poured myself another cup of coffee, added an extra spoonful of sugar, and opened yesterday's newspaper to the crossword puzzle I hadn't finished. 7 across. Delayed gratification. 12 letters. The answer would come to me eventually. At 2:15 p.m., I was settling into my favorite armchair with a fresh cup of Earl Grey and the Spokane Review's Sunday edition. The crossword from yesterday lay completed on my coffee table. Delayed gratification had been postponement. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface. Victoria's name again. I let it ring. The December sun slanted through my living room windows, warming the space where I'd spent so many lonely evenings counting the cost of my generosity. Today, the silence felt different, earned, Intentional. 2:47 p.m. The phone buzzed again. This time I could see the preview of her text. "Mom, where are you? My parents are—" I turned the phone face down and returned to the sports section. The Seahawks had lost again. Some things never changed. By 3:30, my phone had buzzed 6 times. I'd finished the newspaper, brewed a second pot of tea, and started organizing the junk drawer in my kitchen. Amazing what you could accomplish when you weren't rushing around serving people who considered you their personal bellhop. The 7th call came at 3:45. Instead of Victoria's name, an unknown number appeared. Probably her parents borrowing someone's phone at the airport. I let that one ring too. Outside, a neighbor was hanging Christmas lights on his porch, his children running around the yard with the manic energy that only December afternoons could bring. Normal families doing normal things. No one was stranded anywhere, waiting for someone who would never come. 4:15 p.m. My phone started ringing and didn't stop. Victoria, then the unknown number, then Victoria again. The buzzing became constant, like an angry wasp trapped against glass. I walked to my kitchen and unplugged my landline from the wall. Then I turned my cell phone completely off. Perfect silence. I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and heated up a can of tomato soup. Comfort food I hadn't allowed myself in months because every grocery dollar had gone toward making ends meet while subsidizing their lifestyle. The cheese melted perfectly golden. The soup steamed in my favorite mug. Outside, the winter sun was already starting to set, casting long shadows across my backyard. Somewhere across town, 3 people were probably standing in an airport parking garage, arguing about taxi fare and wondering how their personal servant had the audacity to strand them. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 5 p.m., I'd eaten dinner, loaded my dishwasher, and was considering what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had an entire evening to myself, without worrying about emergency calls for money or last-minute favors. I was reaching for the remote when someone started pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of aggressive hammering that rattled the frame and announced pure fury. I set down my tea and walked slowly toward the sound, already knowing exactly who I'd find on the other side. The pounding intensified as I approached the door, each blow more violent than the last. Through the peephole, I could see 3 figures crowded on my small porch, like wolves circling prey. I opened the door to find Lawrence Thompson's red face inches from mine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. "We waited at that goddamn airport for over 3 hours. Eleanor followed him, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her lips pressed into a thin line of pure hatred. "This is completely unacceptable behavior from someone your age, Barbara. Absolutely barbaric." Victoria brought up the rear, her designer coat wrinkled, her makeup smeared. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My parents had to take a $70 taxi because you decided to throw some kind of senile tantrum. Get out of my house." My voice cut through their chorus of rage like a blade through silk. They stopped mid-rant, shocked by the steel in my tone. "Excuse me?" Lawrence's face went from red to purple. "You don't get to make demands here, lady. Not after what you pulled today." "This is my house," I said quietly, not moving from my position by the door. "And I want you out. Now." Eleanor stepped forward, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension she'd perfected over decades of looking down on people like me. "Barbara, you clearly don't understand the magnitude of your mistake. My husband has connections throughout this city. Business connections, social connections. You can't treat people like us this way and expect—" "This was a lesson for you," I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. "A lesson about your excessive arrogance and your poor treatment of people you consider beneath you." Victoria's mouth fell open. "A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're nobody. You're just a—" I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service. I stepped aside and held the door open wider. The lesson is over. You can leave. Lawrence jabbed a finger toward my chest but didn't quite dare touch me. You have no idea who you're messing with, old woman. I've been in this town longer than you've been breathing its air. I know people. Important people. People who can make your life very, very difficult. Is that a threat, Mr. Thompson? It's a promise. His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. You think abandoning elderly people at an airport is just something you can do without consequences? You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are. Eleanor nodded, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Indeed, actions have consequences, Barbara, and yours will be quite public. Victoria grabbed her father's arm. Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old woman isn't worth our time. They filed out of my house like a defeated army, but Lawrence turned back at the threshold. You'll regret this, he said. I guarantee it. I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them pile into their rental car, still arguing among themselves as they drove away into the December darkness. The house felt cleaner with them gone, as if their presence had left a stain that was only now lifting. But their parting words echoed in the sudden quiet. Public consequences, important people, connections. I walked back to my living room and picked up my tea, still warm in its mug. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt something that might have been concern, but it was overwhelmed by something much stronger, anticipation. 3 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee and scanning the Spokane Review when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 3. The headline read, Spokane woman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm. My hands went still around the coffee mug. There I was in black and white, an old photo from the school website, probably 5 years out of date. Below it, a story that made my blood run cold and my temper flare in equal measure. Lawrence and Eleanor Thompson, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at Spokane International Airport for over 4 hours Sunday when family member Barbara Sanders failed to appear for a prearranged pickup. The couple, both in their late 50s, waited in frigid temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning? It had been 52 degrees and sunny. We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that, said Lawrence Thompson, a retired banking executive. We called repeatedly, but Mrs. Sanders never answered her phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just inconsiderate, it's dangerous. The article continued with quotes about my pattern of erratic behavior and concerns about my mental state. Lawrence had painted himself and Eleanor as helpless victims of a cruel old woman who'd suddenly snapped without provocation. No mention of the Christmas dinner rejection. No context about Victoria's demands or their years of financial exploitation. Just me, the villain who abandoned poor elderly tourists during a blizzard that existed only in Lawrence's imagination. I sat down my coffee and read the article again slowly, then a third time. The byline belonged to Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the strategy. Lawrence had called in favors, used his banking connections to get this story placed exactly where it would do maximum damage to my reputation. Smart. Very smart. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a grudging respect for my opponents. They weren't just entitled trust fund babies throwing tantrums. They were strategic, calculating. They understood that in a small city like Spokane, reputation was everything. One well-placed newspaper article could destroy decades of hard work. They had declared total war. I folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside, my mind already shifting into the methodical planning mode that had built my career in education. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. This wasn't about Christmas dinner or mortgage payments. This was about winning. I pulled out my laptop and began typing names into search engines. Lawrence Thompson, Eleanor Thompson, Victoria Sanders. Their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they'd foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at my wall calendar. December 18th, 7 days until Christmas. 7 days to plan something they'd never forget. My phone rang, cutting through my concentration. Dylan's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom," he said, his voice tight with stress. "Have you seen the newspaper?" "Good morning to you too, son." "Yes, I've seen your father-in-law's creative writing exercise." "This isn't funny, Mom. People are talking. My colleagues saw it. Victoria's friends are sharing it on Facebook. They're saying you're unstable." "And what do you think, Dylan?" I kept my voice perfectly calm. A long pause. I think this has gotten out of hand." "That's one way to put it. Another would be that your in-laws are deliberately destroying my reputation because I refused to be their airport chauffeur after being told I wasn't good enough for Christmas dinner." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that. And you let it happen." I heard him take a deep breath. "Look, can't we just fix this? Can't you just apologize to Lawrence and Eleanor so this can all go away? For my sake?" The disappointment felt like a physical weight on my chest. Even now, after everything, he was choosing them over me. "I need to go, Dylan. I have some research to do." "Mom, please." I ended the call and turned back to my laptop. No more distractions. No more excuses. If Lawrence Thompson wanted to play hardball, I'd show him exactly who he was dealing with. By evening, I'd mapped out their entire social network. Lawrence's golf buddies at the country club, Eleanor's charity committee members, Victoria's college sorority sisters who still commented on every Instagram post with exaggerated enthusiasm. I'd found Lawrence's LinkedIn profile, filled with connections to local business leaders and former colleagues from First National Bank, where he'd been a mid-level manager, not the executive he claimed to be in the article. Eleanor's Facebook page was a carefully curated showcase of wealth and privilege. Vacation photos from the Hamptons, a rented house I discovered, not their own. Charity galas where she posed with Spokane's elite. Wine tastings, art exhibitions, designer outfits, all tagged with #blessed. And Victoria. Her Instagram feed told the real story. Our beautiful home with photos of the kitchen I'd paid for. Check-ins at expensive restaurants during months when I'd covered their utility bills. A status update from last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills, our home, our success. The audacity was breathtaking. But it was Dylan's LinkedIn profile that gave me the final piece I needed. His recent activity showed a new connection. Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor at the Spokane Review. The same Patricia Morrison who'd written the hatchet job about me. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the evidence spread across my screen. These people had made 3 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated me completely. Second, they'd gone public with their attack, which meant I could go public with my response. Third, they documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of hypocrisy. I clicked through to Patricia Morrison's profile. 43 years old, journalism degree from WSU, 15 years at local papers, no previous connection to banking or finance, which meant Lawrence had reached out cold, probably through someone he knew from his business network. A 5-minute search through local business directories confirmed my suspicion. 3 mutual connections between Lawrence and Patricia's editor. The story hadn't just appeared. It had been planted carefully and deliberately. Amateur hour. I opened a new document and began typing. Not a response to their media attack. Something much better. A timeline. 5 years of financial support documented with bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks. The down payment for their house, $47,000 from my home equity loan. The kitchen renovation when Victoria decided granite countertops were essential, $18,000 from my credit card. 60 monthly mortgage payments of $2,800 each, $168,000 and counting. $250,000, more than I'd spent on myself in the last decade. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Probably Victoria trying a new angle. I ignored it and kept working. By evening, I had everything organized in a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Bank statements, receipts, photos downloaded from their social media showing off purchases I'd funded. A printed copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins documenting each lie and distortion. I looked at my wall calendar. December 24th was circled in red, not because it was Christmas Eve, but because it was the perfect day for justice. According to Victoria's Facebook events, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 12 people, family, friends, neighbors, members of their social circle. The kind of people who read the Spokane Review and formed opinions based on what they saw there. The kind of people who deserved to know the truth. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen where I'd left my good camera, the one I'd bought years ago to document field trips for my classroom. Time to put it to work, documenting something else entirely. Tomorrow was December 19th. I had 6 days to prepare my case. And then Lawrence Thompson and his family would learn what happened when you declared war on someone who actually knew how to fight. The next morning, my doorbell rang at 7:15 a.m. I opened it to find Sarah Miller, my neighbor of 15 years, holding a casserole dish and wearing a concerned expression. "Barbara, I brought you some breakfast. I thought, well, after what I heard, you might need a friend." I stepped aside to let her in, curious about what exactly she'd heard. "Thank you, Sarah. That's very kind." She set the casserole on my kitchen counter, then turned to me with hesitation written across her face. "Barbara, is everything all right? People are saying the strangest things." "What kind of things?" I kept my voice neutral, even as my stomach tightened. "Well, Jessica from the book club said Lawrence Thompson told her husband you'd been acting erratically for months. And then there was that awful article in the paper. And now there's this Facebook post going around." "What Facebook post?" She pulled out her phone and showed me. My heart sank as I saw Eleanor Thompson's profile, a lengthy post that had been shared 47 times. "Our Christmas visit has been overshadowed by an unfortunate incident with Dylan's mother, Barbara Sanders. We were abandoned at the airport during dangerous weather after Barbara agreed to pick us up. When we finally reached her house by taxi, she became hostile and irrational. We're deeply concerned about her mental state and the influence she's trying to exert over our grandson. This is heartbreaking for our family, especially during the holidays. Please keep us in your thoughts as we navigate this difficult situation with compassion." Beneath it, dozens of sympathetic comments. "So sorry you're dealing with this, Eleanor. Some elderly people just can't accept when it's time to step back. I've heard she's been having money problems. Could that be affecting her behavior? My mother went through something similar. Might be time to consider assisted living." And worst of all, from someone named Margaret Wilson. "Barbara Sanders was my son's 3rd grade teacher years ago. Always seemed a bit off. Not surprised to hear she's deteriorated." I handed the phone back to Sarah, fighting to keep my expression neutral. "It's not true," I said simply. "Any of it." Sarah studied my face. "I didn't think it was. That's why I came over. Would you like some coffee?" She nodded, and as I prepared 2 cups, I told her everything. The Christmas dinner rejection, Victoria's insults, the financial support I'd provided for years, the airport incident, all of it. When I finished, Sarah's kind face was tight with anger. "Those ungrateful little vipers, after everything you've done for them." "It gets worse," I said, and showed her the folder of financial records. $250,000, Sarah. That's what I've given them." She paged through the documents, shaking her head. "And now they're spreading rumors that you're unstable? That's beyond cruel, Barbara. That's calculated." "Exactly. Lawrence thinks his banking connections give him power over me. He doesn't realize I spent 40 years managing classroom politics. This is amateur hour." Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving. "So what are you going to do?" I tapped the folder. "I'm going to let the truth speak for itself, but I need to be strategic about it." "How can I help?" I considered her offer. Sarah had been a good neighbor and friend since William died. She was well connected in our neighborhood association and the local senior center where she volunteered. Having her in my corner would be valuable. For now, just knowing someone believes me is help enough. But soon I might need a witness. She squeezed my hand. "You've got one. And Barbara, don't read the comments on that Facebook post. People love drama, especially when it's not their own." After Sarah left, I spent the day monitoring the situation online. The rumors were spreading like wildfire. Lawrence and Eleanor had crafted their narrative carefully, positioning themselves as concerned family members dealing with a difficult elderly relative. By afternoon, Victoria had added her own post. "Heartbroken that our Christmas celebration is being overshadowed by family drama. All we wanted was a perfect holiday for our parents and friends. Please respect our privacy during this challenging time. Hat family first." It had over 100 sympathetic reactions. I felt a momentary wave of doubt. They had the social power, the connections, the sympathetic audience. I was just one person fighting against a carefully orchestrated campaign. Then my phone pinged with a text from Sarah. "Just so you know, I set Margaret Wilson straight about what a wonderful teacher you were." Her off comment disappeared 10 minutes later. One small victory. I smiled. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. I turned back to my research, digging deeper into Lawrence's network. If he could plant a story in the Spokane Review, I needed to understand exactly how far his influence extended. By evening, I had a clearer picture. Lawrence's banking career had been solid but unremarkable. His connections came primarily from his country club membership and his position on the board of a minor local charity. Eleanor's social status was similarly inflated. Her designer clothes were mostly outlet purchases, her charity work limited to writing small checks and attending events rather than organizing them. They were social climbers, not social leaders. Their entire identity was built on the appearance of wealth and influence rather than the reality. Victoria had learned from the best. Her Instagram feed was a masterclass in selective reality. Photos of fancy restaurant meals, always just the food, never the check. Pictures of their house always taken from angles that hid the unfinished landscaping I'd refused to fund. And buried in her photo archive, something that made me sit up straight. A picture from 3 years ago captioned, "So grateful to my amazing mother-in-law for making our dream home possible. Hatch blessed Hatch family Hatch grateful." That post had been made the week after I'd given them $47,000 for their down payment. The performative gratitude had lasted exactly as long as it took for the check to clear. After that, I'd been gradually erased from their narrative, reduced to an inconvenient elderly relative who didn't fit their carefully curated image. I saved the photo, adding it to my evidence file. The contrast between their public performance of gratitude and their private contempt would be powerful. My doorbell rang again, startling me out of my research. This time it was Mike Johnson, the retired firefighter from across the street. "Barbara, got a minute?" His usually friendly face was serious. "Of course, Mike. Come in." He stepped inside but didn't sit down. "Look, I don't want to intrude, but I heard some folks talking at the hardware store. Someone's spreading rumors that you're having cognitive issues." I sighed. "Let me guess. Lawrence Thompson?" "His golf buddy, actually. Guy named Philip something. Said Lawrence was worried about you, that you'd been acting erratically, forgetting things." "And you came to check if I'm losing my marbles?" Mike's weathered face creased into a small smile. "Nah, I came to tell you that I told Philip to stuff it. Told him I've seen you every day for 15 years, and you're sharper than most people half your age. Told him maybe he should question his sources." Warmth spread through my chest. "Thank you, Mike." "No need. Can't stand gossips." He shifted his weight. "But Barbara, you should know. They're being pretty systematic about this. It's not just random chatter." "I know. It's a deliberate campaign." "Thought so." He nodded grimly. "Want me to have a word with this Lawrence character? I still have friends on the force who could make a courtesy call." The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. "Not yet. I'm handling it my way." "Fair enough. Just know the neighborhood's not buying their story. We know you, Barbara. 20 years of bake sales and block parties count for something." After Mike left, I sat at my kitchen table feeling strangely buoyant. The Thompsons and Victoria might have their social media army, but I had something more valuable. Real people who knew my character. This battle wasn't going to be fought with Facebook posts and newspaper articles. It would be won with truth and real relationships. I turned back to my laptop with renewed determination. Lawrence Thompson had made a critical error. He'd assumed that because I lived modestly and kept to myself, I had no support network. He'd underestimated the community I'd built over decades of quiet integrity. That mistake was going to cost him everything. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of Spokane winter day that made you grateful for warm houses and family gatherings. Too bad I wouldn't be welcome at either. But I had other plans. I laid out my evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial. Bank statements organized by year, each monthly payment highlighted in yellow. Receipts arranged chronologically showing the pattern of my support for their lifestyle. Photos printed from their social media, Victoria's new jewelry, their vacation photos, the expensive Christmas decorations currently adorning the house I'd helped them keep. All of it copied 12 times, one for each dinner guest. The newspaper article went on top of each stack, my red pen notes visible in the margins. L.I. written next to Lawrence's quotes about dangerous weather. False beside the claim about my erratic behavior. Missing context, highlighted where they'd failed to mention 5 years of financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the navy blue one I'd worn to William's funeral, pressed and ready for another kind of farewell. Today I was saying goodbye to the woman who'd been a doormat for her family. Tonight, I'd be someone who commanded respect. At 6:30 p.m., I loaded my briefcase with the evidence packets and drove to Kendall Yards. Their house glowed with warm light, cars filling the driveway and lining the street. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving around the dining room, Victoria playing hostess in the home my money had helped them buy. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 6:45. Perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be seated for dinner, early enough that they'd still be on the main course. No easy escape for anyone. The front door was unlocked. Of course it was. Victoria loved to show off how safe their neighborhood was, how they didn't need to worry about security like people in rougher areas. I let myself in quietly, the warm air hitting my face along with the sounds of laughter and conversation from the dining room. And then Eleanor said, "But darling, that's not how we do things in our family," someone was saying, followed by more laughter. "Our family." after everything they'd done to exclude me from it. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase, 12 faces turning towards me with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Victoria froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Dylan's face went pale. Lawrence and Eleanor looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on their marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Victoria found her voice first. "Barbara, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack of papers, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize, probably one of Eleanor's charity friends, leaned forward with curiosity. "What is he talking about, Victoria?" "He's having some kind of episode," Victoria said quickly. "Dylan, call someone." But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents in front of each guest. "Here are the bank records," I said conversationally. 5 years of financial support, $168,000 in mortgage payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances, everything you see around you. The room went silent except for the rustling of papers as 12 people began examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof of my generosity and their deception. "This is—" One man started, then stopped, staring at a bank statement. "Outrageous," finished the woman across from him. "Victoria, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Victoria's perfect composure was cracking. "It's more complicated than it looks. Barbara volunteered to help us. We never asked—" "Actually," I interrupted, pulling out the newspaper article, "let's talk about what you did ask for and what you told the media about me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I placed copies of the newspaper article on the table, watching as the dinner guests recognized my photo from the unflattering story that had run days earlier. "Now," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence, "let's talk about the real manipulators in this family." Lawrence's face had gone from red to ashen. Eleanor sat rigid in her chair, her wineglass forgotten in her hand. "Mr. Thompson here used his banking connections to plant this story," I continued, tapping the newspaper. "Notice how I'm portrayed as unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor elderly people in freezing weather." A gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up from the article. "Lawrence, what is this about?" "The weather was 52 degrees and sunny," I said before Lawrence could answer. "And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Victoria's parents coming to the Christmas dinner I'd been banned from attending because I wasn't good enough for their company." Eleanor finally found her voice. "That's not— We never said—" "You never said what, Eleanor? That I was too lower class for your parents? That my home-style cooking and working-class conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends?" The woman I'd identified as one of Eleanor's charity friends shifted uncomfortably. "Eleanor, surely you didn't—" "He's twisting everything," Lawrence blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "This woman has serious mental health issues. The stress of aging, financial problems." "Financial problems?" I almost laughed. "Mr. Thompson, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $3,000 a month for 5 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have." I turned to address the entire table. These people have taken $250,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They've manipulated my son against me, banned me from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the newspaper. Dylan spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I didn't know about the newspaper." "Your wife knew," I said quietly, "and her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain for refusing to be their personal ATM and chauffeur. The social dynamic in the room was shifting like tectonic plates. I could see it in the guests' faces, the gradual realization that everything they'd been told about tonight's generous hosts was built on lies. "This is unconscionable," said the elderly woman in pearls, staring at the bank statements. "Lawrence, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this woman's generosity, then attack her publicly when she stopped enabling it?" Lawrence's carefully maintained facade was crumbling. "You don't understand the full situation." "I understand perfectly," the woman interrupted. "This woman has been supporting your family financially while you treated her like hired help, and when she finally said no, you tried to ruin her reputation." Eleanor's voice came out strangled. "She abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your parents," I said calmly. "After 5 years of paying your bills while you looked down on me for my background and education level." The silence was deafening. 12 people staring at Lawrence and Eleanor with expressions ranging from disgust to embarrassment for having associated with them. Victoria made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. "Everyone, please, this is a family matter that's gotten out of hand." "No," I said firmly. "This stopped being a family matter when you made it public. When you used the newspaper to attack my character. When you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral damage for your pride." I looked around the table at faces I didn't recognize but who now knew exactly who I was. "I wanted you all to know the truth before you read about Barbara Sanders in the paper again. Because you will read about me again, but next time it'll be the real story." I closed my briefcase and straightened my jacket. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for." As I walked toward the door, I could hear the eruption beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation, questions demanding answers, the sound of a carefully constructed social facade falling apart. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. In the car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine, letting the full weight of what I'd just done settle over me. 5 years of suppressed anger, hurt, and resentment had been channeled into 12 minutes of perfect clarity. For the first time since William died, I felt truly like myself again. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How did it go?" I smiled and typed back, "Perfectly. I'll tell you tomorrow over coffee." As I drove home through the snowy streets of Spokane, I felt lighter than I had in years. I'd taken back my power, my dignity, and my voice. Whatever happened next, whether Dylan found his way back to me or not, I would face it as Barbara Sanders, a woman who respected herself too much to be anyone's doormat ever again. And that was the greatest Christmas gift I could have given myself. Christmas morning dawned with a silence I hadn't experienced in years. No anxious checking of my phone for messages from Victoria about last-minute gifts they needed. No frantic calls from Dylan about forgotten ingredients for their perfect holiday meal. Just the peaceful quiet of my small house and the gentle hiss of coffee brewing in the kitchen. I checked my phone once, out of habit. 3 missed calls from Dylan, a text from Victoria that simply read, "How dare you?" and a surprising message from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Sanders, this is Margaret Hathaway from the Spokane Review. I'd like to speak with you regarding some allegations about Lawrence Thompson." Interesting. It seemed the dinner guests had been talking. I set the phone aside and poured myself a cup of coffee, adding a splash of the good cream I'd treated myself to yesterday. The artificial Christmas tree I'd put up weeks ago twinkled in the corner, a few wrapped presents beneath it, gifts for Sarah and her grandchildren who had invited me to join their Christmas brunch. For the first time in years, the holiday felt like a celebration rather than an obligation. My doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. Sarah stood on my porch holding a poinsettia plant, her grandchildren Thomas and Rebecca bouncing excitedly behind her. "Merry Christmas, Barbara." Sarah's warm smile was the perfect antidote to last night's drama. "Mrs. Sanders." 6-year-old Thomas ran forward with a handmade card. "I made this for you." I knelt down to accept his gift, a construction paper masterpiece covered in glitter and featuring what appeared to be a snowman with remarkably long eyelashes. "It's beautiful, Thomas. Thank you." "The eyelashes are because it's a girl snowman," he explained seriously. "Like you," I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Well, she's beautiful." Sarah handed me the poinsettia. "Now you're sure you don't mind bringing dessert? I know it was last minute." "I'm thrilled to be included," I said honestly, "and my apple pie is already cooling on the counter." Rebecca, Sarah's 9-year-old granddaughter, peered up at me with solemn eyes. "Grandma said you're coming because your family was mean to you." Sarah looked mortified. "Rebecca, I did not say—" I waved away her concern. "It's all right. Yes, Rebecca, my son and his wife made some unkind choices, so I'm spending Christmas with friends instead." The little girl nodded, processing this information with the straightforward logic of childhood. "That's good. Mom says when people are mean to you, you should find better people to be with." Out of the mouths of babes. "That's very wise advice," I said, meeting Sarah's eyes over the child's head. "Your mom is absolutely right." As they headed back to their car, promising to see me at noon, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. One door had closed last night, perhaps permanently, but others were opening in unexpected ways. My phone buzzed again. Dylan. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but something told me it was time to hear what my son had to say. "Hello, Dylan." "Mom." His voice sounded rough, as though he'd been up all night. "We need to talk about last night." "I think we do. Would you like to come over?" A pause. "Victoria doesn't want me to." Of course she didn't. "And what do you want, Dylan?" The silence stretched between us. Finally he said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I had just enough time to change into a nicer sweater and make a fresh pot of coffee before my doorbell rang again. When I opened it, I barely recognized my son. Dylan stood on my porch looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. Dark circles underlined bloodshot eyes, his normally meticulous appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and uncombed hair. "Come in," I said simply, stepping aside. He walked into the living room and stood awkwardly, as though he'd forgotten how to be in this house where he'd grown up. "Coffee?" He nodded gratefully, and I gave him a moment to collect himself as I poured 2 cups. When I returned, he was staring at the photos on my mantel. William's retirement party, Dylan's college graduation, the 3 of us in happier times. "Victoria and I fought all night," he said without preamble, accepting the mug. "After everyone left, it was ugly." I sat in my armchair, giving him space on the sofa. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" His tone wasn't accusatory, just tired. "You showed up at our Christmas dinner with a briefcase full of evidence specifically designed to humiliate my wife and her parents." "I showed up with the truth, Dylan, after they spread lies about me in the newspaper and on social media." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I didn't know about that. About the article, the Facebook posts. Victoria swore they were just managing the situation after the airport thing." "And you believed her?" "I wanted to." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "It was easier than believing my wife would deliberately try to destroy my mother's reputation." I sipped my coffee, letting the silence speak for me. "The thing is," he continued, "I still didn't understand why you did it. Why you wouldn't just pick them up at the airport. It seemed so petty." "Did Victoria tell you why I refused?" He nodded slowly. "She said you were upset about not being invited to Christmas dinner. But Mom, we were going to see you the weekend after. No, Dylan. I was upset because your wife told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because I wasn't sophisticated enough for her parents. Because my home-style cooking and stories about teaching third grade for 40 years would embarrass them. His face paled. She said that? She also said William knew his place better than I know mine. That he was just a construction foreman who got lucky and had the good sense to stay quiet about it. Dylan set down his coffee cup with a shaky hand. Jesus, Mom, I swear I didn't know. She told me her parents were just more comfortable with their traditional Christmas and we'd make it up to you. And you believe that too. He looked away. I wanted to. The admission hung between us, honest in its simplicity. Last night, he said after a long pause, when you laid out all those bank statements, I knew about the down payment and the mortgage help, but I had no idea it was that much. $250,000? $237,468, I said precisely. Over 5 years. Dylan's shoulders slumped. God, Mom, why did you keep paying? Why didn't you say something? The question pierced deeper than I'd expected. Why had I kept paying? The answer was both simple and complex. Because you're my son, and I love you. Because after your father died, I felt like it was my responsibility to make sure you had everything we'd planned to give you together. Because I took a breath. Because I was afraid of losing you. And now, his voice was small, like when he was a child asking if a thunderstorm would pass. Now I realize I was losing myself instead, and that wasn't a fair trade, even for you. He nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. Last night, when everyone was looking at those papers, the Hendersons left immediately. Mrs. Peterson told Victoria she was deeply disappointed in her. Lawrence tried to explain it away, but no one was buying it. By the time everyone was gone, Victoria was hysterical. Eleanor was having what looked like a panic attack, and Lawrence was making phone calls trying to contain the damage. And you? I was just stunned, trying to understand how we got here, how I let it happen. For the first time, I felt a flicker of sympathy for my son. He'd been caught between two strong forces, his wife's ambition and my generosity. Perhaps he wasn't entirely blameless, but he wasn't the architect of this disaster either. What happens now, Dylan? He looked up, his father's eyes staring out from his exhausted face. I don't know. Victoria's parents left this morning, said they couldn't stay in such a toxic environment. Victoria's talking about moving, starting fresh somewhere else. And the mortgage? His laugh was hollow. That's the thing. She still doesn't understand what canceling those payments means. She thinks we'll just figure something out. She has no idea how close to the edge we've been living. I let that sink in. My son, the financial analyst, had allowed his family to build a lifestyle on quicksand, all because it was easier than telling his wife the truth about their finances. I have to go, he said suddenly, setting down his barely touched coffee. Victoria will be wondering where I am. I walked him to the door, unsure if this conversation had changed anything between us. At the threshold, he turned back. Mom, I'm sorry. For all of it. For not standing up for you, for letting them treat you that way, for taking your money without really acknowledging what it meant. I know, I said softly. I don't know what's going to happen with Victoria and me, but I do know I don't want to lose you. Not over this. Not over her. I reached up and touched his cheek, the way I used to when he was small. You won't lose me, Dylan, but things can't go back to how they were either. He nodded, understanding in his tired eyes. Merry Christmas, Mom. Merry Christmas, son. I watched him drive away, then closed the door and leaned against it, emotionally drained, but somehow lighter. Whatever came next, the truth was finally out in the open, and sometimes that's the only gift that really matters. January in Spokane brought biting cold and fresh snow that blanketed the city in pristine white. As the holiday decorations came down, I found myself entering a period of calm reflection, a stark contrast to December's emotional turbulence. My phone rang less frequently now. Dylan called every few days, brief conversations that carefully avoided mentioning Victoria or the mortgage. The newspaper reporter, Margaret Hathaway, had interviewed me for what became a small but pointed article titled "Local Banking Executive's Christmas Story Questioned," which detailed the contradicting accounts of the airport incident without taking sides. Lawrence's attempts to contain the damage had largely failed. Several dinner guests had spoken to the reporter anonymously, confirming they'd seen financial records indicating I'd provided substantial support to the Sanders family. The article didn't vindicate me entirely, but it cast enough doubt on Lawrence's version to neutralize his attack. Victoria had gone silent, her Instagram suddenly private, her Facebook posts restricted to bland inspirational quotes. The carefully curated image of domestic perfection had vanished overnight. I spent January fixing up my house, one small project at a time. The porch light was replaced, then the leaky kitchen faucet. I hired a handyman to repair the cracked concrete in my driveway and a painter to refresh my living room walls. Each improvement was a physical manifestation of my renewed commitment to my own well-being. "It looks wonderful in here," Sarah commented one afternoon, visiting for our now regular Friday coffee. "That blue really brightens the space." "I've been thinking about changing things for years," I admitted, pouring her a cup. "But it never seemed worth the expense when every spare dollar went to Dylan and Victoria." Sarah settled into my newly reupholstered armchair. "Have you heard anything about their situation?" "Dylan's been vague. I know they missed January's mortgage payment. He mentioned something about exploring options, whatever that means." "And you're really not going to step in?" I shook my head firmly. "No, that chapter is closed." "Good for you." Sarah's approval warmed me more than she knew. "Oh, by the way, Thomas has been asking when you're coming over again. He wants to show you his science project." I smiled, remembering Christmas brunch with Sarah's family. Thomas had insisted I sit next to him, solemnly offering me the first choice of cookies. Rebecca had shown me her collection of polished rocks, explaining each one's properties with endearing seriousness. "I'd love to see it. Maybe this weekend?" "Perfect. And Barbara?" "Rebecca's birthday is next month. She specifically asked if Mrs. Sanders, who tells good stories, could come." My heart swelled at the invitation. "I wouldn't miss it." After Sarah left, I sat in my refreshed living room, contemplating how much had changed in just a few weeks. The weight of obligation that had pressed on me for years had lifted, replaced by genuine connections that asked for nothing but my presence and friendship. My phone pinged with a text from Dylan. "Can we talk? In person?" "Of course," I replied. "Dinner tomorrow?" "Thank you," came his simple response. The next evening, Dylan arrived looking marginally better than at Christmas, though stress still lined his face. He brought flowers, daisies, my favorite, not the expensive roses Victoria would have chosen. "These are lovely," I said, putting them in a vase. "Thank you." Over a simple meal of lasagna and salad, Dylan finally broached the subject I'd been expecting. "We got a notice from the bank," he said, pushing pasta around his plate. "We've missed 2 payments now. They're talking about foreclosure proceedings if we don't bring the account current within 14 days. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "That's standard procedure. Victoria still thinks you'll change your mind, that you're just trying to scare us." "And what do you think?" He set down his fork. "I think the ride is over. I think we built a life we couldn't afford on your generosity, and now we have to face reality." His honesty surprised me. "That's insightful." "Yeah, well, nothing like having your entire life exposed as a fraud to make you introspective." His bitter laugh held no humor. "Victoria's parents offered to help, but they don't have real money, just appearances. The country club membership is their one splurge. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. Like parent, like daughter, I observed mildly. Dylan didn't argue. We listed the house yesterday. The realtor says we might break even if we're lucky, given the market. Victoria is, he trailed off. Not taking it well? That's an understatement. She blames you, of course. Says you deliberately humiliated her in front of everyone who matters. And what do you say? He met my eyes directly. I say she did that to herself. We did that to ourselves. Progress. Slow, painful progress. We're looking at apartments, he continued. Nothing Victoria considers acceptable, of course, but we don't have many options. My salary can only stretch so far. I resisted the urge to offer help. This was his journey now, his responsibility. You'll figure it out, I said instead, echoing words I'd wanted to hear during my own difficult times. It won't be easy, but you're capable. That's just it, Mom. I'm not sure I am. I've been letting other people handle the hard parts of my life for so long. You, Victoria, her parents. I'm not sure I know how to stand on my own. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. This was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. You do, I said firmly. You absolutely do. You're William's son, and he never backed down from a challenge. Neither will you. Dylan's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. I miss him. I wish he could see what a mess I've made. He'd be disappointed in some of your choices, I said gently, but never in you, and he'd be the first to tell you it's never too late to start over. After dinner, as Dylan prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. Victoria and things aren't good. Haven't been for a while, if I'm honest. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? His question held no accusation this time, just genuine curiosity. I am, I said truthfully. I never wanted your marriage to fail, Dylan. I just wanted to be treated with respect. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. Too late, maybe, but I understand. As his car disappeared down the street, I wondered if it really was too late. For him and Victoria, for him and me. Only time would tell. February brought a series of unexpected developments. The first was an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a check for $10,000 and a brief note in unfamiliar handwriting. For your kindness to my daughter. I'm sorry. Eleanor Thompson. I stared at it for a long time, conflicted about what it represented. Was it a peace offering? Conscience money? An attempt to buy my silence as the Thompson family reputation continued to crumble? After careful consideration, I deposited the check. Not because I needed it, though it would certainly help, but because rejecting it would continue a cycle of pride and punishment that needed to end. The second surprise came in the form of an invitation to Rebecca Miller's birthday party, handwritten by the girl herself in purple marker. Dear Mrs. Sanders, please come to my birthday. There will be cake and games and no mean people allowed. Love, Rebecca. I laughed out loud at her earnest declaration, touched beyond words to be included in her special day. I immediately went shopping for the perfect gift. A starter telescope I'd seen her admiring in a store window weeks earlier. The third development was more sobering. Dylan called to inform me that their house had sold for slightly less than they owed, and they would be moving to a 2-bedroom apartment across town at the end of the month. Victoria's taking it hard, he said, his voice weary. She's talking about moving back to Portland to live with her parents while I get back on my feet. Is that what you want? A long pause. No, it's not. But I'm not sure what I want matters anymore. I recognized the resignation in his voice, the same tone I'd used for years when capitulating to demands I couldn't really afford, emotionally or financially. It always matters, Dylan. Always. The fourth and most unexpected development came on a cold Saturday afternoon when I returned from grocery shopping to find Victoria sitting in her car outside my house. For a moment, I considered driving past, avoiding the confrontation that surely awaited. But that would be the old Barbara, the one who backed down to keep the peace. Instead, I parked in my driveway and waited as she approached, her designer boots crunching on the snow-covered sidewalk. "Barbara," her voice lacked its usual sharp edge. "Victoria, this is a surprise." She glanced toward my front door. "Could we talk inside? It's freezing out here." I hesitated, then nodded. Whatever this was, better to face it directly. Once in my living room, Victoria stood awkwardly, taking in the new paint, the repaired furniture, the small improvements that represented my independence. "You've been redecorating," she observed. "Just some long overdue updates." I hung up my coat. "Would you like tea?" She shook her head. "I won't stay long. I just needed to say something." I gestured to the sofa. "I'm listening." Victoria sat perched on the edge, as if afraid to fully commit to being in my home. Her normally perfect appearance showed subtle signs of strain: chipped nail polish, hair due for a color touch-up, a sweater I recognized from years ago instead of something new. "The house is sold," she said abruptly. "We're moving next weekend." "Dylan mentioned that. I'm sorry things worked out this way." "Are you?" Her question echoed Dylan's from weeks earlier. "Contrary to what you might believe, Victoria, I never wanted to see you and Dylan struggle. I just couldn't continue enabling a lifestyle built on my sacrifice." She flinched slightly at enabling, but didn't argue. "My mother sent you money, so that explained the mysterious check." "Yes." It was unexpected. She sold her tennis bracelet, the one my father gave her for their 30th anniversary. Victoria's voice held a mixture of disbelief and something like respect. "She said it was blood money, that they should never have let me take advantage of you the way they did." I remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. "My parents aren't speaking to each other. My father blames my mother for caving and acknowledging what happened. My mother says my father's pride destroyed their reputation." Victoria's perfectly manicured hands twisted in her lap. "Everything's falling apart." "I'm truly sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. "The thing is," she continued, looking anywhere but at me, "I don't think I've ever had to face consequences before. Real ones, I mean. My parents always fixed things, or I found someone else to fix them." Her eyes finally met mine. "Like you." The admission clearly cost her. Victoria had built her entire identity around being the flawless woman who controlled her environment perfectly. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know." For the first time since I'd known her, Victoria seemed genuinely lost. "Dylan and we're not good. Haven't been for a while. He says I care more about appearances than people. That I threw away a relationship with his mother because I was embarrassed by your Target clothes and practical shoes." I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you think?" "I think," she took a deep breath, "I think I was taught that value comes from how things look, not what they are. That the right address, the right clothes, the right friends are what matter. And I think I've destroyed everything that actually did matter by believing that." Her self-awareness surprised me. I'd expected recriminations, perhaps even threats, not this raw vulnerability. "Why are you telling me this, Victoria?" She looked down at her hands again. "Because I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind my father gives when he's trying to smooth things over. What I did, what we did, was wrong. Using you for your money while excluding you from our lives. Saying those awful things about William." Her voice broke slightly. "He was always kind to me, even when I didn't deserve it. Just like you were." The past tense wasn't lost on me. She recognized that my kindness had limits, as it should. "Thank you for that," I said simply. "It means something that you came here to say it in person." Victoria stood, our brief moment of connection complete. "I should go. We have a lot of packing to do." At the door, she paused. "Dylan misses you, really misses you. Whatever happens with us, please don't shut him out. He needs his mother more than he'll admit." With that, she was gone, leaving me to ponder this unexpected olive branch. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, on either side, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by certified mail with the weight of legal consequences behind every word. I signed for it at my front door, noting how the spring air smelled of new growth and possibility instead of the winter desperation that had marked those dark December days. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. Inside, 3 months of missed mortgage payments had caught up with Dylan and Victoria like a tsunami of reality. 8,400 in arrears. 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee, reading it the way you'd read news about distant weather. Interesting, but not your problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks with increasingly desperate calls. Victoria's number blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. Lawrence and Eleanor, whose social standing in Spokane had evaporated like morning mist after their Christmas dinner humiliation. Even Dylan, whose calls I'd been answering but whose increasingly transparent hints about financial help I'd been ignoring out of a mixture of tough love and curiosity about how long it would take him to swallow his pride and ask directly. The answer, apparently, was 97 days. He knocked on my door that Thursday evening, no longer the confident financial analyst who'd excluded me from Christmas dinner, but someone who looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 months. Dark circles under his eyes, his expensive suit wrinkled, the smell of desperation clinging to him like cheap cologne. "Mom," he said when I opened the door, "we need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck. The fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated in 8 years because every spare dollar had gone to his lifestyle. The repairs I'd finally been able to afford now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's American dream. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee?" He shook his head, perching on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Mom, I need you to know how sorry I am about everything. Christmas dinner, the newspaper article, the way the way we treated you." "Go on." "I didn't know about Lawrence planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I found out..." He ran his hands through his hair. "Jesus, Mom. The things they said about you behind your back, the way they talked about our family, about Dad's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of William, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your father?" "That he knew his place better than you knew yours. That he understood boundaries." Dylan couldn't meet my eyes. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 5 years of mistakes filling the space between us. Outside, I could hear my neighbor mowing his lawn. The normal sounds of a normal Thursday evening in a normal neighborhood where sons didn't exclude their mothers from Christmas dinner. "The house is in foreclosure," Dylan said finally. "I know. We can't make the payments without..." He stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage." "I know how it looks, Mom." He leaned forward, making sure I was looking at him. Do you know how much money you sent us over 5 years? I nodded. $237,468. I know the exact amount because I finally did something I should have done years ago. I added it up. His face crumpled. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, son. That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 5 years when I could have been building a relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy life. I know that now. He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. But maybe we could start over. Maybe there's a way to... Are you asking me to resume the mortgage payments? The hope died in his eyes. We're going to lose everything, Mom. The house, Victoria's respect for me, her parents' approval. I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. He started to cry then, quietly, like a man who'd run out of other options. I've lost you, haven't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever. I watched him for a long moment, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd let his wife's family convince him that his mother wasn't good enough for their company. Dylan, I said finally, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that I'm going to resume paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I be grateful for scraps of your attention. Then what does it mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel where William's photo sat next to a new picture. Me with Sarah and her family at Rebecca's birthday party last week. The first celebration I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect instead of demanding I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's convenient. I turned back to him. And it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me from family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. He nodded slowly, understanding perhaps for the first time that respect wasn't something you could take for granted. The house? He asked quietly. Isn't my problem anymore. I sat back down, feeling lighter than I had in years. You're a grown man, Dylan. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize your choices. He stood up slowly, his shoulders straight for the first time since he'd arrived. You're right about all of it. I know. He walked to the door, then turned back. Mom, for what it's worth, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner, I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, but proud too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the good whiskey and stepped onto my back porch. Spring was coming to Spokane, the trees beginning to bud, the air warming with promise. In 4 months, I'd be 63. William had been gone for 8 years. I'd wasted 5 of those years being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate sacrifice. I wasn't planning to waste any more. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dinner Sunday? The kids want to show you their science projects. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't welcome on stage. The whiskey tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. To listen to 2 other stories that are channel favorites, click on the boxes on either side.